Hey everybody, today's video is all about my favorite US Beatles album, Yesterday and Today, and specifically the mono version of the album. And I'm going to tell you a bunch of reasons why this is my favorite US album. And I like a lot of the US versions of the Beatles albums, I gotta say, by the way. Like, I like Rubber Soul, because it's so different and it's got that folk rock thing going for it. I love the Beatles' second album. I think it's a really, really cool compilation of their early work. But definitely my favorite is Yesterday and Today. And for those of you who don't know, if maybe you're new to the Beatles or you're wondering, like, what's the difference between the US albums and the UK albums? So the Beatles albums in the UK, of course, were all the albums that the Beatles and George Martin put together themselves. They would work out the track order, and each of the albums, except for Hard Day's Night, of course, and the double album, White Album, but usually there were 14 tracks, and they were put out the way the Beatles wanted, with their artwork and all that kind of stuff. But in the US, for their US label Capitol Records would put together their own versions of Beatles albums. So, for example, like the Beatles' second album, it's kind of a weird combination of tracks from with the Beatles and also a few tracks from even like the Hard Day's Night album that was coming out, that was soon to come out in 1964. So, and some B-sides and stuff. So Capitol Records would take B-sides and leftover tracks from albums and put them together to make extra albums, is what I would call. And Yesterday and Today is a great example of Capitol Records taking these extra tracks and actually in this case too, taking some tracks that hadn't even been released yet and putting them together for these like in-between albums. So Yesterday and Today, this comes right after Rubber Soul, but right before Revolver, that was released in America. And there's, of course, besides just the track listing, this album has so much going on and so much controversy and just a lot of interesting things about it. This, of course, famously had a different cover originally. It's the Butcher cover, which we will show you right here. And originally, it was going to have this cover with the Beatles all in butcher outfits. And a bunch of them got printed up and were even released, sold in some stores. But then there was a big controversy, and it was a big, people didn't like it. They didn't like their lovable Beatles all of a sudden wearing these butcher outfits with pieces of meat and baby dolls' heads on them and stuff. So the albums got recalled. When they got recalled, in order to save some money, Capitol Records just pasted over this new cover. And this is the cover this is the standard version of Yesterday and Today. And of course now finding a Butcher cover or finding a cover that has the Butcher cover underneath the cover, those are very, very rare and obviously very collectible. I'm lucky enough to have one of those. And in fact, if you want to check out, I have a video where I talk all about my Butcher cover. So you can click on that video somewhere up here. There'll be an option to click on that. And that'll give you more history as to, the whole, the way the Butcher cover unfolded and all that kind of stuff. So right off the bat, this is an interesting record just because of the iconic Butcher cover and the pasted over whole thing. So that right there is a cool aspect for me, at least. But back to the music. I think this is the most successful of all of the kind of compilation, we'll call them, albums that Capitol put together. It's got really an amazing track listing, and the way the songs all flow into each other actually works really, really well. So you got side one, you have Drive My Car, which of course is normally the opener for Rubber Soul, so it just works as an opener anyway. You get Drive My Car, then you have I'm Only Sleeping, then Nowhere Man, then Dr. Robert, then the song Yesterday, and then it ends with Act Naturally. So right off the bat, it seems like a weird choice of songs, right? Because you've got songs from Rubber Soul, Revolver, and the Help album, all mixed in on side one. Side two, you have Andrew Bird Can Sing, If I Needed Someone, We Can Work It Out, What Goes On, and Day Tripper. Also, they flow very, very nicely. And as an album, it's really a really nice listen from the very start until the very end. The other very, very cool thing about this, especially this mono version, you get a bunch of unique mixes that were only on this album. And those include I'm Only Sleeping. You get some extra backwards guitar in there. Dr. Robert has a longer fade out at the end, and you can hear John saying some dialogue at the end, like "okay," something like that. I've talked about this before, but you get that. You get a different version of "And Your Word Can Sing," or a different mix, rather, mono mix, slightly different. You also get a slightly different mono mix of "We Can Work It Out" as well. So you get these very, very unique mixes that you can only find on this album. So that is appealing to me, at least, right away. And I just like all the mono mixes on here as well. It just works really, really well. Now, unfortunately, the stereo version of this album, Yesterday and Today, at least the initial pressing of the stereo version, has a lot of those mono mixes I'm just talking about, like I'm Only Sleeping, Dr. Robert, those ones. It's in fake stereo. And that, of course, is not very good. So I recommend the mono version of Yesterday and Today. So it's just always been one of my favorite of the U.S. albums. And when I sat down to think about, if I had to choose what is my favorite of all the Capitol U.S. albums, it was really a close race between the Beatles' second album, Yesterday and Today, and Hey Jude. And when I really started thinking about it, Yesterday and Today just came out on top for me, just because it has that cool backstory with the Butcher cover. It's got unique mono mixes you can only find on this album. And it's just my favorite time period for the Beatles, really. 65, 66, Rubber Soul Revolver time period. Hands down, my favorite Beatle time period as far as songwriting, as far as the arrangements and the recording techniques they were using, and just the way they looked. I mean, they look really cool on this cover. Granted, they look really bored out of their minds on this cover, but they just look very cool. Other thing about this cover that I just thought of, this is actually a reversed image. The true image of this is flips around the other way. I don't know why for this cover they decided to flip it, but they did. And anyway, just a little bit of a tidbit there. If you're wondering, and I'm sure you are, if this particular copy that I'm holding is a paste-over Butcher cover, it's not. It's just a standard mono version of Yesterday and Today. By the way, I'll show you the record because why not? I do really like the Capitol Rainbow label. I always have. It's just a really really cool looking record. Unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of the way these Capitol pressings sound. Usually the vinyl itself is always pretty noisy. I'd say it's, as far as the Capitol albums always, to me at least, they always sound a little bit overcooked, is how I would say it. A little shrill, not a lot of low end, and just, I don't know, not all that great. But that doesn't mean it's not fun to listen to, because it definitely is a lot of fun to listen to, and it's definitely a really key Beatles album to have in your collection, even if you don't care about the Capitol albums or the U.S. discography of the Beatles. I think Yesterday and Today is an album that everyone should have in their Beatles collection. Just a really cool compilation that was put together. So that's it for me. This is my choice for my favorite U.S. Beatles album. I would love to know what yours happens to be. I know a lot of people love Meet the Beatles, which would be the first Capitol Beatles album that was released. I know, like my dad, I think whenever I asked my dad, what's your favorite U.S. Beatles album, that's the one for him, because that was the first Beatles album he ever had, and it just had such an impact. And unlike with the Beatles, it does have a different track listing as well. It includes I Saw Her Standing There, I Want to Hold Your Hand, This Boy. So it's got some extra tracks on there that really, it does pack a punch. So I'd be curious to know what some of your favorite US Beatles albums are. Maybe you don't like any of the US Beatles albums at all, and that's okay as well. But for me, it's Yesterday and Today. So hope you enjoyed the video, and hope you're all doing well. Take care, and bye for now.